I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen's Departmental Budget Workshop for January 18th, 2018 to order. Today we have a bunch of departments. Looking forward to hearing the presentations. We will do there'll be a minor modification for the 145. We're going to move finance up into that slot. Owing to the fact that Mary Jane has spared all of us with that hacking that cold. She's typhoid Mary Jane around here right now. So she decided to take a day and try to recover. So we're going to, and then based on a previous commitment, Sandy's got to move up to that point. So that being said, let's move on to, let's start with Board of Assessment Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals. And Barb Hammerlin is making the presentation. So, what would you like to bring to our attention?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Basically, the budget is pretty similar to last year. Last year's presentation. It is increased just slightly due to the 2017 revaluation and expected number of appeals for the following year after the revaluation.
Okay. Questions? Barb, this is probably an unfair question. Traditionally we see a ramping, right? The first year after reval is the highest number of claims.
Actually, in the past, from the past revaluation, the first year we didn't have as many appeals.
Right.
The second year, I think it's once everybody's received their tax bills, they all of a sudden decide that they need to appeal, and what folks really need to remember is that they are not appealing their taxes; they're appealing their assessments.
Great.
So.
And hopefully there's some in the viewing audience on GCTV who are hearing this, and that is the appropriate channel and the appropriate methodology for appealing your assessment. Any other questions?
When will the notices be going out?
For
the reval?
They have been mailed already.
Okay, great.
The application period for appealing your assessment can start now, but all applications must physically be in the assessor's office by 4:30 February 20th in order to get an appeal hearing date in March.
Great, thanks.
Barb, just a quick question. Do we post that on the website? Is that
Everything's
posted?
already up there.
I thought so.
Yep.
Okay, good. Mike, you have a question?
I think so. Is it me, or is there a typo?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out.
Because I usually go right to the percentage, and then I look at all the and it's
It is clearly a typo.
58%?
yeah, it's not 58%.
No, no, no.
20.4%.
Matt, if they look at the, in the summary,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there
More
was a
accurately
problem
reflected.
with the first half of the individual budget pages. So
Got it.
that
So it's really
summary sheet is correct.
so it's really 0.24. Yeah,
A couple of decimal points.
it looks like it might just be going to a different cell in the formula, and it's
And there was. There
right.
was a-
Okay.
so
Just I saw that immediately. I was like, "How did that happen?" And then I looked at the numbers. I was like, "No, it's
I
fine."
was saying, it's no big deal.
Yeah, there's really not much of an increase. 58.9%. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much. Got scared.
What is it?
Okay. Next, Historic District? Oh, I'm sorry, Zoning Board of Appeals. Anyone here? No one here for Zoning Board of Appeals? Okay, all right, that also is a nominal increase, right? 3623, that's basically Board and Commission Secretary salary increases. Other than that, no changes. Good.
Same percentage.
Yeah, same percentage
Work.
number, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So revised. Okay, Historic District. Ann Street, thank you very much for coming in today.
Our income is based on fees for applications at $50 per application. We have run somewhere between 28 and 32 or 3 forever.
Consistency.
Pretty consistent. We administer the town center district and also south of town a second district. So there's maybe 300 buildings, and any exterior changes that are visible from the public right away, we review at our monthly meetings. On our expense side, we have a secretary who takes notes and files our notices, our things. We have some printing costs occasionally. Under education and training, we belong to a couple of professional organizations. In our miscellaneous expense, we have typically carried or requested $1,000 there. We, in the past, have done seminars. We did one on lighting. We did one on replacement windows. We have done sometimes awards. This year, I think our project is going to be a revision of our, for lack of a better term, we have this little pamphlet that theoretically people are given when they come into planning and zoning that describes our rules of procedure, has some guidelines about, what constitutes good preservation, sort of to help them get their application done. We haven't really revised that or even reprinted it in, I can't remember how long.
Too long.
Maybe too long. And at this point, we have found several communities, Old Lyme and also the city of Hartford, among others, that have really nice websites located in their town website that includes not only the procedural stuff and how to make the application, but also guidelines about preservation. One of the things that we've been wrestling with in this last year is how do we as a historic district respond to solar panels? And there's, without boring you about that, there's a lot of legal issues about denying or not on solar panels. And so that's sort of commingled with what is it going to look like and how do you put them on historic buildings. And we think that we are just about ready to start writing down some guidelines about how we would like to see them. And this sort of grew into, well, maybe we should address this whole pamphlet and how do you deliver this kind of information? Well, in 2018, it's on the website. It's not, printed. So it's unclear how that will happen, whether there are town people who can help us with that, whether we need to recruit an intern or whether we can find a community resource that can help us do that. We've just started on recognizing that we need to do that.
When you start talking about guidelines, are they reviewed by in-house counsel, or, because you were talking about legalities and something. So.
Well, I don't think so, because our guidelines come from the Secretary of the Interior, generally
Okay,
speaking.
so they have been vetted
And-
at some point as far as the...
Yeah. And there's state legislation that says you really can't deny solar panels based on anything other than what it's going to look like. So we couldn't say flat out, sorry, no solar panels in Guilford.
Just when you said guidelines, I just
Yeah.
wanted to double check that.
Yep, we can certainly do
Get
that.
ourselves in a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Nope.
Matt, I should probably mention something here to everybody. We've seen a lot of boards and commissions today, and Ann's budget does go up by a small percentage. It has to do with the secretary. What we did is we went through all the secretaries for boards and commissions and raised them just under 1.25% from 17 to 17.25. So some of the increases you're seeing are just because of that. We also, at the same time, though, went through and checked the historical amount of time that the commission clerks or secretaries were using, and some were increased, some were decreased, but overall, you'll see the secretary's total budget this year actually was a decrease by going through it that way. So just want to give you a little bit of background.
Okay.
Some of the boards and commissions come up here, and they'll see that will be an increase or decrease because of that.
Okay, good. Thanks, Mitch. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work you do. Youth and Family Services. Lynn?
Human services.
Oh, Human Services first. Jumping past it. Yes.
Human services.
That was always
Hello, I'm Terry Bergantino,
Hey, Terry.
Chair of the Council. As many of you know, all our funds are, go right to nonprofit agencies for services. We don't have any expenses, and we're all a volunteer board. Some of the members here today are Dee Lundberg, Liza Petra, and Pam Ellman. And Pam is going to elaborate some more.
So our proposed budget for 2018-2019 is $89,691. This is a 3.46% increase over last year, but it is the smallest increase in the last several years. All the agencies for which we've recommended funding serve Guilford residents. That is paramount in our assessment when we listen to the presentations. We wanted to give you some examples of the kinds of services that these agencies provide, the efforts that they make to ensure that the funds they receive are directed to Guilford residents, and the efforts that they make to ensure that they all act in a fiscally responsible manner. So first up, BH Care, the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence. Last year, the Umbrella Center provided domestic violence support services and counseling for 93 Guilford residents. It provides outreach in our schools. It works with the Guilford Police Department in their lethality assessment program, which trains the police to recognize domestic violence situations and how to respond to them. BH Care told us specifically that as a result of this program, the Guilford Police have become very responsive to domestic violence incidences in Guilford. The VNA, the Visiting Nurses Association. The VNA says that it can direct any funding it receives from our town directly to Guilford residents. The funding is directed towards healthcare services in the home, including one of their newer programs, which is hospice. Last year, VNA provided services to 654 Guilford residents. The VNA also told us that it is cognizant of state and federal budget implications to its programs. So it's trying to find efficiencies in its services. One example of this is the closing of their private duty nursing program. However, as dire as that sounds, it actually had a good outcome because they were able to successfully transfer all of their patients to another program, thus ensuring continuity of their care and their safety. Lastly, Guilford Before and After Care. As you all know, this organization provides before and after school care in 3 of our elementary schools. At the time of their application, it provided tuition assistance to 14 children. No child is ever turned away from Guilford Before and After Care. And we wanted to provide you a very specific example of this. We were told about a parent of one child who lost their job. But the child was able to remain in the program because Before and After Care provided a scholarship until that parent found another job. And the child could remain in the program as a direct result of Guilford Town funding. Any questions?
Wonderful. Questions?
Well, I think it's probably the question a lot of us have as we're looking through this. I don't think there's any doubt the importance of the services at all. But obviously there's been some big number changes on a few of them. There's a few that have gone up, but there's some that have been eliminated. I'm wondering if you can go through a little bit on some of those items. Not the importance of them, or maybe it ends up being that, but you had mentioned VNA, which went up a little bit, a couple $1,000s from 8 to 10 from last year on the budget. Yeah, Guilford Friendly Visiting went up from 1 to 3,000. Women and Family Life that went from 3 to 10,000. BH Care, formerly Harbor Health, went from 2 to 14,000. Charlie's Closet 1 to 5,000. And then there's a few that went down quite a bit. Life Links went down a lot. Community Health Center was eliminated. Literacy volunteers and Guilford Food Bank.
We're seeing some of the
Right
numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers generally have been very stable from year to year.
Yeah, VNA was not 3,000.
Am I?
I'm seeing the same thing you're seeing.
We all looking at the same thing?
I'm following you, Mike, but they
It was a
are.
3.5% increase, but the right. What's the increase that you have a 3.5 increase?
Yeah, 3.46, right.
Let me look at the summary so I can double check.
Right. Friendly visiting, for instance, went from 3,000 to 3,500. And Community Healthcare and Clifford Beers didn't submit an application this year, so they would not be on there. Neither did Literacy Volunteers. Now, Lifelinks went from, they remained stable at 2,000.
It says 8,000 for last year.
Yeah, I see that. Because our total was the 86,691.
And now it's 89,691.
It says literacy volunteers.
No, now it's 89,691.
Why is that unfunded? Again, literacy volunteers.
They didn't submit an application.
They didn't submit an application.
But
So the total went from 86,691 to
submit an
89,691. So it's a $3,000.
But
The
we
bottom
have-
line number is correct, but the
Yes, it is.
allocations of
Yeah,
those
but
numbers.
they've got to be wrong. I mean, we have never given literacy volunteers $14,000. We used to give them
No,
1,000,
that
1,500.
14
This
was,
says they got
14 was
12,000
Meals
this
this year.
10,000.
14 was Meals
Yeah,
on Wheels.
I don't. Maybe you know what? Maybe some columns are mixed up because we give Meals on Wheels. Where's Meals on Wheels?
It does.
Something's wrong. Those numbers are much more stable than
You're
what
right,
you're
all
looking
you
at.
do is skip a line and the numbers will go.
So whatever.
They've worked with the literacy volunteers of Valley Shores.
Yes,
Yes.
right, yes. And they did not actually submit
Not this year. They
this
didn't
year.
submit an
They don't
application.
always submit.
Mary Jane.
He didn't. I'm
Not
on
this
board
year.
of that.
You have to talk to them,
Sandy,
I will.
Remind
She's
them.
checking right now.
yeah.
Sandy puts these sheets together.
In looking at the expenditures for the year, the $1,000 from literacy volunteers is exactly what you said. I mean, that's what's shown on our budget for the expenses, so something's off.
Something's, so that,
Breathe.
yeah, I know.
What's
whip it back and
important is
forth.
the bottom line numbers are correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
The issue of what I was bringing
Yeah.
up, that we all saw was the allocation and why that was happening. That was more internal to you and why you were giving some less and some more. They don't submit an application, that's obvious. But,
I can run
That's gotta
down
be
last
corrected.
year's numbers
That's
if
gotta
you
be
wish.
okay.
Yeah, why don't you do it?
That might help.
Okay, so for last year's numbers, BH Care domestic violence last year was 5,000.
Are you talking about the year we're in, or are you talking about
The adopt-
16, 17?
17, 18.
17, 18, okay.
Right. BH Care, which was formerly Harbor Health, was 14,000.
There you go.
CHC was 1,000. Community Health Care. Clifford Beers was 7,500. Charlie's Closet 5,000. Friendly Visiting 3,000. Food Bank 3,000. Meals on Wheels 14,000. Before and After 4,000. Center for Children 10,000. Lifelinks 2,000. Literacy Volunteers 1,000. The 1191 stays the same. A B&A 8,000 and Women and Family Life 8,000.
Okay.
It's like the bottom line balances.
It is. All right, we'll have this document revised, but needless to say, the programmatic decisions you guys have made are based on what you feel provides significant services to the residents of this community and serves the needs.
We have them submit the application,
Yes, right.
we have them come in and we discuss it with them, and then we regroup and make our recommendations.
Other questions?
I was just going to say, it's all 100% expended as of this year except for one. Is that just because they haven't sent their request in yet? I mean, not request, obviously it's been approved, but they haven't got the money yet.
They had told me they had requested the money. I checked with finance, and they
It's
they didn't have a
$1,000 and then you're
request.
going to be
Right.
100% spent, which is the
Correct.
way it is every year. So.
Right.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Lynn?
Sure?
I think so.
Okay.
We are.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So I'll start with the operating budget, which, according to my calculations, is about 1.1% higher than last year. And in order to get to that, there are some line items that I reduced, some that we couldn't help increasing, like full-time salaries, that's contractual. And if I go down the line, the things that I've increased the most, I put a little bit more in building maintenance because our HVAC system is now 10 years old, and every year there's something new that pops up that needs to be fixed. That was a little bit more expensive than the previous year. Under program development, and I had not increased that in a long time, and I did increase it by $800 to cover some increasing program costs. Namely, two of our biggest, our highest cost programs, theater and camp. We fund a lot through grants that we get regularly. In theater, our State Department of Education funds have gone down this year. They took 6 months for us to start getting the money, and it's a little bit less than last year. And under camp, we usually, and theater is also, a large part of it is self-sustaining through ticket sales. And then under camp, we usually get a $5,000 grant from Shoreline Collaborative, and last year that was cut in half. And I have a feeling that we'll probably end up doing the same thing this year. So what we did to make up for that, in part, was to look at our programming and try to choose things that are more cost-effective. We still serve 25 kids in camp for free that couldn't afford it anywhere else. So I thought 800 was a very slight increase, given that I had decreased some other line items, things that we don't need. So that's the bottom line on the budget. Any questions on that before I go to revenue?
Yeah, actually, go ahead. You make the point with regard to building maintenance that the HVAC system is aging, apparently.
Well, it's 10 years old. And so, and I don't think it was the best of systems. If you speak to Steve, he might agree with me. So every year we seem to be getting some new things that are wrong with it.
So you're not advocating a replacement
No,
there.
no,
You're
it's not.
just
Yeah.
saying it's 10 years old now. The annual maintenance is ticked up
Yeah.
a couple $100.
Yeah.
Beyond what it used to be
Yeah,
when it
absolutely.
was newer.
The first 2 years, we didn't have any extra expenses on that system at all. But in the past 3 years, I'd say there's some extra expenses,
So like there's service calls and you have to pay for parts.
extra service calls above the quarterly maintenance.
But the necessary maintenance is taking place to maintain the system.
Quarterly, yeah. Yeah,
Thanks.
yes.
Any others?
Just real quick, you had stated, did you state a 1.1% increase? Because we have 0.6.
Well, yours is better. I like yours better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to go with that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Last call.
Last call.
All right.
That's my final answer.
Mitch, full-time salaries, are there any adjustments needed here or not?
Well, there will be adjustments made to the GEA employees when the contract is
Right.
finalized.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yep, Lynn's.
I'm the only one in there right now.
Lynn's in the GSA, so that's finalized. And then I already mentioned the change to the secretary. Yeah. And then Lynn's made a change, which I think she mentioned in her write-up there about the grant she gets that goes to offset the salaries a little bit. So.
Right. We used to get, from the State Department of Education for that line item, we used to get about $25,000. This was 10 years ago, and they've chipped away at it every year. So I think now it's down to 21 and change. 21,696?
996.
Oh, that's pretty close.
That's what you told me.
Yeah, no, that's correct. That is absolutely correct. So on to revenue. And I've kept my revenue goal the same as last year. And that's always an iffy thing. I mean, we do well every year. We do meet it 100% and sometimes more than 100%. For example, for this current fiscal year that we are in, we should have hit 50% by the end of December. We hit it in November. So we're at about 60% right now, a little bit more, which means that it's going to be a good year for that. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Good or
That just
bad.
means that we're seeing a lot of kids.
Right.
Our caseload should be about 50, we're at 70. So every 2 to 3 years, we get this big spike, and this is one of those years. So in reference to as it relates to the operating budget, the net cost to the town is always at least 100,000 less than what I've put down, because our revenue is 106,721, and we always hit it, if not more.
Then just to clarify, in your revenue, you're not including that grant we just discussed, right?
No, that's not. Revenue is critical.
Make sure we just weren't
Yeah.
double
Nope.
counting that.
Because the grant goes as an offset to salary.
Salaries, right.
Yeah, that's from the
Not
State
to the
Department of
general-
Ed.
Not to the general fund.
Right.
The,
Just wanna make
clinic,
sure that-
the clinical funds are from what we do in the clinic.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One of the expenses in the, going back to expenses, but it ties into revenue, is the claims processing. Do you expect any change in the contracted service for processing the claims?
No, and actually that, our electronic health record, that part of it is free. Our billing software actually went down, I think about $1,500, if not more, because I switched the plan. It's still the same company, Cario.
Okay.
So that part of it went down. That's used to cost us about $5,300 a year, and that's less. Tony pays that out of information systems.
Okay.
But as far as the claims, it depends on how many claims we send out per month.
That's what the fee is based on?
That's what the fee is based on. And that doesn't change. It's usually about the same.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there any overlap with the school system
It's in what way?
financially?
No. No, and as a matter of
Pretty
fact,
clear distinction between.
yes, yeah. We have one person who works out of Guilford High School, our student assistance counselor, and she falls under Guilford Youth and Family Services. So she deals with the kids over there who have substance abuse issues.
Okay.
Good.
Good.
Others?
Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Sandy, you want to do finance now? Oh, social services, right. Why am I jumping ahead all the time?
That's good. Keep it at it.
Budget numbers, but kind of giving that ship to me to see that.
Hello.
Not much.
So the current budget versus.
I know y'all. Hi. I know y'all like to see data and trends. So there you go. And what I've put in there is only what I actually can quantify.
That's a good thing to do.
What?
That's a good thing to do.
The charts and can be captured by the charts. They don't include any of the services where people just come in and we can sit with them and assist them with filing for their DSS applications, home, be it home care, MSP, Title 19, their follow-throughs, any of that stuff. We just don't have the time or the capabilities to really quantify all of that. It doesn't include us advocating and assisting with Social Security or municipal agent information, insurance, financial, going over their financials with them, or their housing issues with them. We just don't have the way to capture that information. It also doesn't include the way being able to capture just the general welfare that I'm able to do, and private offerings from residents and agencies. Basically, on the front page, you'll see that we haven't our services, the residents and the households haven't decreased from year to year, including this year. In 16-17, we assisted over 657 households. New to the services were 172 households last year. Over on the right-hand side, mid-year, we've already assisted 516 households, and new to those new households helped out of that 516 were 113. So, and the pages beyond that just follow.
Wonderful. Thank you for the data detail. It's always helpful.
So as far as my department request, there is a bit of an increase, and I put it in the and it's 2.71 of my budget, but my budget is pretty small in comparison to a lot of other budgets for departments. So any increase is going to seem big, but the largest one is, and it's put in overtime, and I've had this issue in the past. My program coordinator was a hourly person, and she went to salary, and then due to Department of Labor laws 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, she then got switched back to an hourly position. So between September and February, we are pretty jam-packed in there tight with work to do. And any amount of extra work, you have to give comp time to. Right. It's hard to find time to give time off.
Are you talking about a part-time employee?
No, I'm talking about a full-time employee.
Let me try to address that a little bit. Some of you may or may not remember about a year and a half ago, the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, put out a ruling that said anyone making less than $54,000 a year, here or there, had to be paid hourly and could no longer be put in as an exempt employee. We had about 9 employees that fit the bill there. I met with each of the employees and their department heads at the time, Tammy being one of the department heads at the time. And under advice of counsel, we moved those exempt positions to non-exempt positions, keeping their salary the same, just saying that they were now being paid hourly instead of as a salary person. What that did for this particular person that Tammy's addressing is it really constrained her work week to 35 hours a week. And unlike when she was putting in time above the 35 hours as an exempt employee, it didn't matter. Now it did. For those that have followed this at all, this was overturned by the courts. However, our Labor Council advised us just to leave it as is instead of trying to flip-flop back and forth. So we've left it at this situation that it is right now, which puts us in a situation where Tammy is requesting overtime. It was not in my budget, but something you'll have to decide as we go through whether it's going to be acceptable to you or not.
And essentially, it's not overtime pay. It's just between the 35 and the 40 hours.
You just hit my answer, although the calculation you have down there does suggest you're paying at an overtime rate.
No.
Did I just read that wrong? Let me see.
No, if you look at my breakdown, it's paid.
5 times the regular to pay, it says, though. But she said, I didn't do the calculations.
5 times 16 times regular rate of pay.
Right.
Okay, so you're just paying. Right. Okay, so you're not paying overtime unless you hit the 40 hours,
Right.
which you're keeping an eye on, which is not
Right.
happening.
Yes.
So this is a 5-month period where you need more than 35 hours is what you're suggesting, but less than 40.
Got it?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Any other questions on this budget? Yes, ma'am.
I did just put up other stuff in the packet about Guilford. According to 2016 United Way's Alice report, 20 to 24% of Guilford's population lives below what is known as the survival budget. And I put the information about what Alice is in here. It is a asset limit income-constrained, employed household, and I gave you a bit of an executive summary of that, and what a household basically lives under, the amount of money. A single individual would be living under $22,000 a year, and what that type of expenses they could be looking at. A family of four would be living under $70,000 a year, and what kind of expenses they'd be looking at, and what kind of hourly wage they would have to get in order to get to survive at even that. According to the report, 39% of Connecticut households lack the liquid assets necessary to survive a financial shock. The vulnerability means that a medical emergency or an unexpected car repair has the potential to cripple an Alice household. Those are the type of people that we do see at the office. Again, our aging population here in Guilford, we're at 22, in 2015, it was 22% of the population. In 2020, it'll be 26%. So again, those are the people that we're seeing a large population of the elderly in Guilford. And if you'll notice, even on one of the pages here, our appointments have actually increased last year, and our walk-ins increased. Just people just coming in for information. People coming in and just want to sit down and talk to us about things. And maybe there isn't something we can do for them, but they just need to come in and talk about their situation and what is there out there for them. So that's who we see.
We fit into that 20 to 24% category. Where are we in terms of our own residents? Where do we sit within that 20 to 24%?
What do you
and how
mean,
many
sir?
people are served in Guilford? How many people does this involve in Guilford?
The actual people?
Number.
People or households?
Oh, I have household numbers.
How many households?
Well, as I said to you, last year we had 657 households. And I think there's 9,000 households.
Well, I think Ken's question is how many of the
657.
the 9,500 households in Guilford are actually in that range that fall below the sustainability number, right? Is that
Well-
what you're asking, Ken?
Oh, well, 24%.
So
how many households?
Well, if there are what, 9,500,
Well, if there's
10,000
9,500,
90, yeah. 20, maybe 2,500 households in town.
2,500 households.
so
Between 2,000.
they're not all coming to me.
How many do you see here?
How many households?
657.
You see 657 out of this stuff.
Yeah.
And from those households, do they have to meet the federal and state poverty line for you to serve them, or do you serve them regardless?
I serve them regardless. Well, first of all, I'm the municipal agent for the elderly, so the elderly anyone can come from and they do. They have issues about nursing homes or home care.
Right.
They can come in and see us,
Okay.
certainly, and they do come in and see us. So, and these numbers here are. Those are the ones that we can actually capture. Some people come in, we don't get names, we don't get, we have anonymous people call us just for information. They come in and ask us things. So
I'd also like
we don't
to-
have a count of that.
I'd also like to point out that Tammy and I are engaged in a potential new program to benefit our residents. And it is part of a small cities grant program at the federal level to provide financial assistance for qualified families for housing improvements, energy, and homeowners-related improvements. And we're at the front end of this process. We are actually probably going to be issuing an RFP for a consultant to help us write the grant and to administer the grant in concert with Tammy's group.
Yeah.
So.
Tell me, what is the actual age cutoff for elderly? When you gave the percentages of how many people fell
Well, it
into
starts at 65. They say the percentage of it was, according to the Connecticut Commission on Aging, it's Guilford's over 65 population is going to be at, it's at 22% now.
Be at 26.
And, sorry?
When will it be at 26?
2020.
2020.
And by 2025, it'll be at 30%. So, the other thing, just so you know, what I wrote down here is that we find our department clientele is aging. While at our food bank, we're seeing a lot of our clientele at the food bank, we're seeing larger families coming in. So what that means to me is that it's just harder for them to meet their basic needs. And the other thing is this year we established a relationship with another a nonprofit, a startup, to provide diapers to low-income families. So we've been doing that for about 7 months now.
Is that the diaper bank?
Diaper bank, yep. Which Guilford didn't have at all, didn't have any access to. So we've been doing that for about 7 months now. So.
Good. Other questions? Very good. Tammy, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. And nice to see faces. Different, well, some new faces, some old faces, and different
Some familiar faces now. Familiar faces.
Oh, I'm sorry. Familiar
This
faces.
is the way we like to turn it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for all that.
Yes.
You want to see the old faces anymore?
Better off before saying anything.
I know.
Okay, now we're at tax collector. Where are we?
Finances.
Should have known you would find it.
Sandy, what would you like to tell us?
Just to start off, the little black box on a summary page that is wrong, one of the ones. We have an increase of $3,309, which is a 1% increase.
There's a rogue spreadsheet somewhere.
What, not
It
6.1%.
was the first update to this point.
Yeah.
It was wrong, and then
Everything
everything that
else
we did
got
yesterday,
cascaded.
beyond, there was, oops. All right, so in our salary line, the only one that changed is Mary Jane's because she has the contract. The rest are not settled yet. Mine is also up June 30th. Travel is up a little bit because of the conferences that Mary Jane goes to and different training that we use. The publications, that's just a little bit up. The legal notices and the budget publication, that's up a little bit.
So those are newspaper expenses or the
Yes.
printing? Or some combination of the
A
above?
combination of both. The budget publication is the printing from Shoreline Times, and the legal notices are when the bonding has to go as a legal notice,
Yeah.
and the town meeting, all those little things that cost a lot of money to put in the paper. And the capital and budget books went up a little bit. Ultimately, our plan is that everybody will use their tablets next year, and we won't have to do the budgets, paper form. And if that works, then we'll be able to save a little money there, but we're not confident enough yet to take that out.
Neither are we.
Has there been any?
So far, so good.
Has
So,
there been any progress?
You're a technology guy. You better be comfortable with it.
I tell you, the new guys use these tablets, and I have a mouse and a big machine with big 4 screens on it, so I'm getting used to it.
Is there any progress in being able to do the publications electronically, or we still have to print them in the newspaper?
as far as I know, by statute, I think they have to be.
I do know it's an issue up the state. They've been
Mandate
talking
relief
about it is
issue.
mandate
Yeah.
relief. You're absolutely right.
It's
So
Mandate relief issue.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, well, what it would also be would be the newspaper death knell, which is another story, but, I mean, or at least part of it.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's our problem.
I'll check with our legislative delegation
We
to
have
see where that
questions on
is.
any-
Well, I know they've been
these
talking about it for years,
Sure.
and just.
Okay, I have one.
It's
on-
technically
Yeah, you
possible.
still have to print some hard
An
copy.
appreciable item is in there and unbudgeted for consultant. Will we be budgeting for that?
No, the consultant we had in there
Oh,
was.
that was in that bridge period?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
anticipate having.
Right, from
that
Sheila
meeting.
on to
Yes.
Mary Jane?
Yes.
Okay.
But we left it in only because was part of that budget, so,
Right.
yes.
And there was an offset in full-time salaries, so.
Right.
Mm-hmm, right.
The annual audit that's contractual, and we split that with the Board of Ed. And I pretty much,
How much longer does the current audit contract have? I know we just got a presentation from Bloom Shapiro a couple of nights ago.
it goes out, I believe, to 2021.
Oh, we recently negotiated.
Yes.
We did, but we only contract on a year-to-year basis. They
Okay.
provided an RFP bid response. They were awarded it based on their response. Series of 5-year, 1-year renewable contracts.
I see.
So, and I have some familiarity with this. 90 days before the end of the fiscal year,
Oh,
your
boy.
board
Here we are.
has to make a decision and appoint the auditor. So,
Mhm.
you'll be reminded of that.
This is an annual chore.
It is. But you're right, we did go out for RFP, and they were the lowest,
Yeah.
they were the bidder that we selected. So.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on finance?
I actually have a question since we're on audit.
There you go.
Seeing that we had a huge discussion with the auditors in front of us the other night. And by the way, congratulations on all the work you've done. I'm saying it again for anybody who's not going to see the Board of Finance meeting. They could still watch this one. For the great work you guys have all done. There was a lot of talk about the broad risk assessment. I know that we've got to vet out numbers or anything. Do we have any intention of adding that
to the operating budget?
Right.
Would not be my intention to do so. That was
Just if anybody's heard, will hear that.
Right.
We're looking at alternate funding coming out of some of the surplus possibly to do that. Okay.
There's been a fairly modest engagement of that, according to Bloom Shapiro. Not too many school towns have taken advantage of that opportunity.
Correct.
I
We
don't
may have an
believe-
opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
But that's not going to appear in operation. It's going to appear
exactly,
or be taken from another source.
Exactly.
Okay.
That would be my plan.
Yes, and I would agree with that.
Thank you.
I just had one question. Any comments on revenue? I think it's kicked up a little bit this last year. It's just the interest, I guess, on.
It's the interest, we've been earning a little bit more on interest, and it's my understanding that they're gonna work on, trying to, I think it was Mary Jane and Mr. McKenzie were gonna work on maybe some other ways to earn some more interest on some, and make some more revenue.
That always sounds good.
It does.
Agreed.
More interest.
But we do, we are, it has to meet certain criteria. We can't just
Yeah,
invest.
I think I recall the conversation pretty well.
Yes.
All right.
There are no derivatives like they tried in California a few years ago. Anything further?
While we're on revenue, sorry, I'm just looking at last. I'm just looking at the column. So 40,000 is in this budget that we're in now.
As adopted.
Right.
And we're hoping that we will surpass that.
It's going to at least double.
Yes.
Right. So that's okay because I'm seeing 40, 70, and 80. So
The 70 is an estimate as to,
department estimate.
Right.
Okay, got it. So 80 is the request.
Yes.
Got that. Which makes sense to where you are right now because you're well over midpoint of the year. Got it. Thank you.
Any further? One last time? Thank you very much, Cindy.
do you want to, there's not much, debt is pretty,
Yeah, it's pretty perfunctory, just,
that's all basically, The figures come from bond council and their schedules, so that's what we, for the debt, for principal and interest, they're pretty much straightforward.
Right. Under debt. Debt retirement. I think the total increase in debt retirement is about $617,000, and that's after the application of some premiums, the refunding premiums that we
Yes.
had received a couple of years ago, which I think 2 years ago there was a schedule developed and as to how those were going to be paid over this 3 or 4 year period, I believe it is. So there are also premiums which are going to be able to be applied next year as well
Yes.
to offset the last of the big increases in the high school bonding.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the only other one that I have for you is operating transfers. We are increasing the recycling request by $5,000, and that's we split the town and town of Madison's give us each an amount to help offset some of the salaries and operating expenses and whatnot. And last year, we were actually we were short by $16,000. So depending on the metal, last year, the price that we were getting for the metal was lower. Now it's coming up a little bit, so that's why we didn't go for the full $8,000 that we were short last year. We're just going for 5 more, because it fluctuates by the revenue that we can get from
The offsetting.
offset.
Good.
So,
And Madison has also agreed to that same increase, is that on?
well, we wanted to get it through here first before Darlene, gets a hold. Jim usually contacts Madison and works with them, so they're usually, if we tell them that that's what we need for salaries and whatnot, they're very receptive. So.
Okay, good. Others? Thank you, Sandy. All right. Let's see if I can get this right. Tax assessor. We might as well get ahead of schedule as long as everybody, and they're here, right? Hello, Ed. Good afternoon. All right, Ed. The budget looks relatively flat, with the exception of some salary increases at this point, right?
Well, my budget consists of 7 accounts. Of the 6 that I have control over, or somewhat control over, we're asking for a $290 increase.
Okay. Any questions on the assessor's budget? Charlie, you look like you're trying to figure something out there. You're all right? Pretty straightforward?
Yeah. I just wanted to see that.
No questions? Sorry to make you come up and sit and wait for that.
Absolutely no problem. Thank you.
But good job on holding your increase to $290 on the other 6 items. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
You ready? Let's go across the hall to the tax collector's office.
Good afternoon,
And
everyone.
first off, may I just make the following comment, Deb? I want to commend you and your staff for the way you handled the public during the December timeframe, particularly
thank you.
particularly over the holidays, as there was a significant uptick in traffic, not normally expected during that time, and also the manner in which you dealt with the public related to the pending tax changes. And the consistency and the courtesy you extended to the folks that I talked to. There were some that didn't believe you and wound up in my office, but I continue to reinforce that you had done all the appropriate research, and so congratulations to your department on that.
Thank you. I will let them know. Okay. My budget is 1.95% higher this year. Some of that is salary. And, there was a error.
Yeah.
in the-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just half the page. We're ignoring those now.
What did she say actually?
1.9.
1.95.
Probably the summary, right? That's right.
I am asking in office supplies, we're asking for a money counting machine. We do get a lot of taxpayers who are paying in cash, and they are paying big bills with 20s, 10s, and 50s. They're the new bills that stick together, and when we have that big of a $4,000 bill that comes in, we do a recount on it by another, the assistant or the clerk, and then when we do the deposit, we also do another recount on it. So it's just duplicating. The money counter machine will also check for counterfeit, and we are doing that also with just a counterfeit pen.
It's worthwhile as long as we continue to use money in this country.
Yes, that's right. But a lot do pay with it, and they, yeah. So.
Your printing costs up a little bit?
Just, I added a little bit because I always run a little bit close.
Okay.
So I went up $500.
Okay. Everything else looks fairly consistent.
Yeah, we're having Quality do all of our mailing and bills for us. They have, this will be the third year.
Quality Data
that they're-
Systems?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
So that office supply bump, the $4,100 reflects that new machine you're talking about, so
Well, yes, the new machine, and then I buy, in that item also are my envelopes.
Yeah, but
that I purchased,
I guess
too.
what I'm getting at is,
Yes.
that's sort of likely to be a one-time bump.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's not going to reflect
No.
your ongoing
No.
office supply
No.
expenses. You're buying an extraordinary machine that'll
Correct.
last for a while.
Mhm.
Sounds like a useful item,
Yes.
but just jumping
I
ahead.
think it will make the office more efficient.
Next year, we'll be
and,
looking back in the
talking about that
30,000.
risk management. so-
Yeah, yeah, no.
Sometimes there's only one person in the office, so when somebody comes in with a big bill, and you're the only person there counting the money, you have the
It's
machine
interesting
there,
that you
too.
say that it checks for counterfeits. I mean, how do they, I don't technically,
Yeah.
I'm sure they got some gadget in there, but what happens if it doesn't pick one up? I mean, do they
I don't know. I know
do
when
they
you go to
guarantee
the,
that result?
when you go to the bank with a deposit, they're putting the cash in the machine,
Yep.
and we have had them where it will kick the bill right out.
Hmm. So
I don't know what we'll have to find out if there is a guarantee.
Yeah, and you have to think through a policy of, folks, this one's no good.
Yeah, right.
Do you hand it back? Do you keep it? Return it
I
into
would
the
hand it
bank?
back to them because I'm not going to take a counterfeit.
Well, no,
That's
I'm not
the
keeping
nice
it.
thing about a machine. You
Machine.
can do it more promptly so that you can connect,
And
this bill.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sort of surprised there's
Well,
not some
we're-
obligation to actually notify a bank when that
well,
happens.
we're using yes.
You do it right in the office.
You just hand it
That's
back to
something
them.
to find out
Hand it
about,
back to
yes.
somebody, sort of puts it right back into circulation. So the
Well, I
next,
know when you go to do the deposit,
We're not in the enforcement.
Somebody hands you a counterfeit bill, you
right?
call the
When you
police.
go to the bank, no. So yeah, we'll have to find out.
I have to think it through. I'd be
Yeah.
interested to hear what the result of that. And
I have never gotten one at the window. We always check it with the pen,
Mhm.
but I know when a deposit has gone over. There was an instance where it was counterfeit.
Now with the machine, we would do it right there at the
Yeah,
window.
got it. No, that's helpful.
I don't know.
So yes, we will have to develop a policy.
I mean,
for
the
that.
bank may have
Yes.
protocols on
Mhm.
that. You could probably get a good start from them, what they expect you to do.
I'm sure they do.
What's that?
That protocol's.
I can even give you the name of the report. Everyone must be reported. No gray.
Certainly at the bank level,
Yeah,
no question.
But you're right.
I
they
would
could
think at
give
this
them
level too.
advice if they get one. You're right.
All right. Who knew it was two-way information?
And you know what? You may fall under some of the similar guidelines because you guys
Yeah,
are all bonded.
Yes.
Right. They're all bonded, so. Makes sense.
Okay.
All right.
I mean,
Did you tell
a
them
separate
earlier?
discussion, but I mean,
We're
what a way to
processing
bury some money.
$467,000 in
Say
debt
that loud.
Right.
each year.
Yes, yes.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
That is a lot.
I missed it.
All right, anything further?
Like this.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, town clerk. Anna, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. These numbers don't match either. All right, Anna, what,
Okay, well,
it's
I
pretty-
think I'm kind of easy too. I really, the only real increase I have is in the salaries also. Everything else is pretty much status quo. I haven't really gone up on anything. I feel confident that I can just keep everything the same as last year and hold to that.
The office equipment is a lease expense or a warranty?
No, just, that's basically maintenance on,
Your machines.
we've got a timestamp machine
Yeah.
and typewriters, believe it or not, we still,
Oh,
use
not the
those for
copiers,
certain-
everything
No,
but the
No,
copiers.
yeah, the copier falls under its own, the copier lease supplies, falls under its own line item. And we're told, what that increase will be, or whatever. The finance gives us those figures. So, yeah. But everything else, there has been no increase on dues or the education, anything, that's pretty much stayed the same. So I don't expect any increases there.
And the recording expenses are essentially offset by filing fees? Or does all the filing fee go to the state?
No, the recording fees that we get,
Yeah.
the recording fees, no, yeah, actually, I mean, it probably is, but the recording expenses are for our land records management system for the recording, yeah. And also Adkins for printing supplies, the, well, it's on your thing here. Yeah, the COT, they manage our land records, the fee system that we use for the finance, recording of the fees. The dog license, recording of trade names, military discharges, the dog license program, and then Adkins covers the microfilming of our maps and land records, the storage of the microfilm, and then miscellaneous things such as binders and the dog license supplies. So, and there's no our contract with COT is up for renewal in October, but they have assured me that the increase is very slight, about 1%, so it shouldn't be too much of a big deal.
And I'm going to jump to revenues quickly.
Okay.
We're projecting about a $46,000 increase in revenues, largely as a result of probably where we stand today on some of those recording fees. Conveyance taxes are up, so that's an additional $46,000 in revenue that's being forecast to come through the town clerk's offices. So.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Just unrelated.
Sure.
Are you projecting out when you might run out of room in the vault?
Well, I have gotten new shelving. If anyone cares to come down and inspect, we have some new shelving in there, so that will help. But we also inherited the probate court vault when they vacated about 7 years ago. We've got their vault for use, so which is wonderful. So if we need to, we have a few things over there that don't get used very often. So if we need to have more storage, we have that.
Great.
And then we have also the vault downstairs, which is kind of the community vault, but we all share.
Sure.
So hopefully, Jeff, you won't have to worry about that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And just only because it's fresh in my mind.
Sure.
The grant, the historic grant
Yes.
preservation. You want to
Yes.
just talk a little bit
Okay.
about that?
Yeah, the Historic Document Preservation Program was established about almost 18 years ago. It's with the state of Connecticut, and basically it's funded through money that we get from the recording fees. Originally, it was $3 was taken out for the recording fees. 2/3 of that went to the state of Connecticut, the state library, and the town clerks get $1 of that. So we have and now they just increased the fees in December by $7. So the town clerks will now get an additional $1, so we're getting $2, which goes into this historic document account, which I can use at my discretion for restoration of records, the maintenance of the records in my vault, or in keeping. So I've used that for the restoration of some of the old volumes, for the cabinets, for the shelving. I purchased scanners so that we can scan back old records, volumes of land records to be put on the computer. I've had the maps digitized and put on the computer so that people can access them and we can print them off of the computer. This is a great program. So that account alone is wonderful because I don't have to come and ask for extra money every year in my budget to purchase cabinets, scanners, or to have these volumes restored. That's a wonderful thing. Last year we took in over $3,000, which is added to that account. Then the other 2/3, which goes to the state, 70% of that goes towards this grant program. So all the towns, now this year Guilford, they've just adjusted the criteria. So before we fell into the small town category. Last year I got $4,000 for a grant, which I used for restoration of volumes. This year we are eligible for $6,500. We fall under the medium-sized town category now, which is really great. And then so yeah, it's a good thing.
Good.
It's really wonderful.
And it has to be used for the
It
preservation
has to be
of
used
documents.
for the record keeping, for the records. It can't be used for office equipment, or like new desks or something like that. It's got to be used for the preservation of
Preservation
records.
and access to records.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I know that over time, we've built up a bit of a fund reserve because we
Yes.
haven't spent it all.
Yes.
Are there any larger projects that you would foresee being able to
Well, I'm always
accomplish?
sending off, every year I've got, I have the person from CoFile who we use for the preservation of our records. He's got quite a list of books that we're working on. So I'm going to be sending some more this year than I have in the past.
Good.
So with that, in addition with the extra money we're getting with the grant, so I probably will use a good portion of that for that. But, as I've said, it's being constantly replenished, monthly, by what we're getting for the land records for the $1. Now it's $2 every month. So it's whatever we were getting before. Last year we got over $3,000. Just double it for this year.
Okay.
So it's wonderful.
Good.
Yeah.
Anything else? Town clerk's budget? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Ann.
Thank you.
Registrar of Voters.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, can I ask, do we think that the dollar amounts are okay on these pages? Or is it just the
Yeah.
percentage?
It's a percentage. It's a percentage.
If you look
The
at the
dollar
two,
increase
if you look at the numbers down below, they look
Yeah,
fine.
down here, but what about
but
here?
in the black box,
I
not
wouldn't-
the
I wouldn't
dollar.
look at the top.
Ignore the
Yeah,
black box.
Ignore the whole box.
Ignore the whole
That's
budget.
one thing that increased.
All right, who's going first?
We go together. Well, as you can see, our budget fluctuates from year to year depending on the events we have for the year. So we try to project how many is the primary. Hopefully, we don't do a double one for the budget referendum.
The figures by the referendum expenses are per referendum. So when we see $2,000 there, if we have 3 budget referendums, that'll be $6,000. And the same with primary. It's per primary, per party.
Right.
So if we have like, although it doesn't, no, if we have a primary, which I'm sure we will in August, there will be both a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, and that counts
That's the
as
same
2.
day.
That's 2. So that 3,500 reflects 2 primaries?
No, it reflects one.
Reflects 1?
Yeah,
Everything reflects one.
everything reflects one.
We're hopeful.
Well, no, it's the way we've always done business, is we put out the expenses for one and then have to beg if there are more.
Because we do have a statewide election coming up.
Yeah.
That means that these numbers are undoubtedly going to be doubled or perhaps even tripled.
Well, for the November election expense, it is a big one, because the items that cost the most money are the memory cards and the ballots, and because it is the most complicated ballot that we see, with 11 races and how many parties, 6, 7 plus petitioning candidates and write-ins, it makes it a very expensive proposition, more so than the presidential.
And the possibility of primaries in
Yeah.
there, too.
Well,
Primaries
those-
and general.
Those come under primaries, yeah.
Okay. So that line's going to be higher.
Anything else?
As you notice, our education and training has gone down, and that's because we finished the mandatory training for.
So you guys are
rabies.
experts now?
We are.
Excellent. Certified?
Can we hire you
We
out?
did. We even have a certificate.
I thought you would.
We'll learn it, do it, teach it.
There you go.
And that was $1,600 each for each of us.
So the
was well
1,500
worth
is just maintenance or of just keeping up to speed with.
Yeah.
Which has always been, anyway, it was always 10 hours of education time, but that was thrown in for certification.
Anything else? Any further questions? Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, we're right on schedule
Just
again.
as a by the way to Mike, we will be making an appointment to meet with you to negotiate our salary for the next 4 years.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Okay.
I was thinking about that. When are you coming back before us? So,
This summer.
Okay.
Okay, building department. Bill. Good afternoon, Bill. What would you like to bring to our attention on your budget? It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, pretty much repeat of last year. There was we got an uptick in the salary and the permits. Let's see, where is it there? Yeah, the little bit added in there for the permits due subscriptions. That's to take care of additional code books. There will be a code change in the spring or early summer. And the books are going to be very current books, so unlike last time where I picked them up on eBay, these will be right from the ICC, so we'll be completely up to date. And that's pretty much the story.
All right. My question is on contracted services. I think at the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance meetings earlier this week, we're fully aware that we've engaged the services of your predecessor for special projects. So, do we have an anticipation of what that is going to be, or are we looking to continue to just offset those over budget expenditures with anticipated revenue?
Well, right now he's concentrating on the Guilford House, which is I think the initial permit on that was about $48,000.
Right.
And we'll call it the trades permits, electricians, plumbers, sprinklers, all that kind of stuff, will more than offset his anticipated salary for, let's see, I think it's about a one-year project, very fast-tracked, and should be winding up, I think, in May.
Okay.
So at that point, we should be in good shape revenue-wise. Okay. And Joe had a magic account that took care of that.
That's an ugly term.
I don't know, but yeah, that was what we worked up to.
Magic is a term of art. I think it was fully expected because we knew this project was coming.
Yes.
That we would have a significant increase in building permit fees, which would offset any over expenditures in the contracted services line.
Okay, that sounds good.
That sound good?
That sounds better. Yeah.
That's my recollection from last year. Good.
Well, the trending of the rest
so
of it is
then this.
equal, so.
What's that?
I was going to say the trending of both of those this year is equal, just about.
Agreed. Are you aware of any other substantive projects that may be coming online where we're going to need to re-engage?
There's looking seriously into doing something somewhat similar with the Goose Lane Medical rehab up there.
Okay.
Yale is basically going to, over a period of 2 years, gut the entire building and keep it open.
Right.
And it's a very complicated type project, one that's going to demand quick response. It's going to have a lot of permit fees, and we may want to use the expertise of George because that's where he excels in that type of project. So that's ongoing at the moment, and I did have him slip up there a couple of days, checking up on a couple of things for me, and that project should really start to take off when he's kind of winding down at the Guilford House.
Okay.
So if he's willing, that would take a lot of heat off of the department at this point.
Right. And I'd be comfortable with the non-magic account approach. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, since it's hard to quantify what those expenses would be at that point, but they would only be incurred if there were substantial permit fee increases as a result of it. So I'm pretty comfortable with leaving it in that fashion. As an offset.
Yeah, at this point, any time that he did spend at, we'll say, Goose Lane,
right,
would be filtered into the other project. So
right,
it would just be, go from here to there
right,
and home.
Okay.
So we're looking, an hour here, hour there type of deal.
Right.
So.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Bill.
Is it? Okay.
That's it. Kevin, natural resources. Now that number looks real.
Okay, we are basically following the same type of activities that we had last year. Slight increase in salaries due to contractual agreements there. The major change or small change in here was an increase in the geographic information systems. That went up $2,000. There's an increase in fees for the parcel updates. They years ago, when we're getting to better standards, it was a lower price because we're just kind of digitizing in the assessor's maps. There's been a standard created for GIS mapping and stuff, and we basically have to use the deeds and the subdivision maps and stuff to get the actual dimensions of property, so they all start fitting together correctly instead of a line drawn on a piece of paper halfway through a property which doesn't line up properly. So there's increased time in doing it in a correct fashion there. So,
Gotcha. Kevin, could you just, for those who may not be familiar, how many departments in town access the GIS system?
GIS is utilized by the engineering department, building department, zoning, planning and zoning, health department, my department, both natural resources. The assessor's office refers people to this one also. Instead of coming into their office for the records, they basically go on our GIS system, get the appraised values. Fire department, and I believe also police department also utilize this, and it's actually a big thing with the realtors. They actually get their basic information on a property from this before they even start researching stuff.
So is it available to each of those various departments at their terminals, or do they have to come into the system?
This is an online software, so anybody can log on to the town website, click Guilford GIS, and you're into this software here. We have a different level of software, which is licensed for the town, which goes into a little deeper detail of stuff, and that's open to, like I said, the departments that I read off.
So if the police wanted to access it, they access it at the police department?
Yep, it's all through, yep.
They don't
Yep,
have to come...
Nope, everything now is, we used to have, the in-house used to be, each computer had its own little program installed on it.
Yeah.
And that had to be updated. We recently moved away from that, and that's also web-based on the department side also.
And my understanding is this fire department take uploads and merge it into their own databases?
The police department and I think fire department also take uploads of the parcel information that they have.
Right, and they integrate it to the systems that they have.
They have, correct.
Right, so
this information goes out to
I'll speculate as to why this is in your department budget. It's probably because you're the one most familiar with the operation of the system, as opposed to being spread across everywhere.
Correct. GIS information came out of the environmental fields in planning, and now it's sprouted up to all these different things from fire departments, police department, public works department. But originally, information GIS was a local planning tool utilized by planners and natural resource agencies.
Gotcha.
And then now it's broadened out to a larger field of things.
You got it. Thank you.
Advertising for legal notices for planning and zoning, office supplies for Inland Wetlands Commission, Natural Resources, Conservation Commission, Tree Advisory, that's all in that $2,500. Tree maintenance, more trees are falling and getting damaged and need to be taken care of, so it's an increase of $10,000 with that. Part of that also is the Tree Advisory Committee wants to try to also do some tree maintenance along the center of town, and for some of the newly planted or planted trees that have been in there for the past 10 years, they're
branches and stuff are growing erratically and need to be pruned to make a healthier, long-lasting tree.
Do you recall how that line on the tree maintenance line was increased last year? I think originally you asked for 75 and got 85, and it went to 85.
Yeah, I think
And now you're broadening the responsibilities.
I think it went to like 90. I think it went to 90, and it got dropped to 85. I don't quite have the sheet from last year in front of me, but I think it went to a higher number and it got dropped back.
So 95 looks like a safe number.
I hope so. I mean, we're seeing more damage by bugs and beetles and stuff like that, and the trees moving up by our lifestyles nowadays, all the shipping and stuff like that. You're getting more and more pests and stuff invading us. Our big one right now is the yellow ash borer. With the ash trees, I'm not sure if you notice going down the road now, you start seeing this kind of grayish color tree now with a tannish color starting to spread down it. That's all from the ash borer damage, and there's no way of preventing the spread of that disease in this region. It's out and not be able to take back now. So pretty much in the next 6 years or so, the ash trees are going to take the fate of the hemlocks. Education and training, state equal, and vehicle maintenance, state equal, and open space stewardship. That's maintaining the open space properties we have in town. Also included in that is also the, I say open space, also some of our agricultural properties that we have licenses out for. And then a new item which I added here is utilities. This past year, we added a well house to our Northern Heights grazing area. And that's for utilities to cover the operation of that well house for the term now.
Do we get grazing fees?
We do get grazing fees. Where's the sheet of paper I had on that?
Out west, that's a big deal, obviously.
Oh, it's huge.
We get.
Sorry to throw you off track.
No, I had that number on a piece of paper which got out of order, and I say one property we get about $3,500 at $110 an acre. Another one we have at $100 an acre for grazing, and actually no, grazing we only get $175 a year, but for that grazing area. He had to put up front a lot of money to install fencing and stuff there, so he's being prorated back on that. So he basically has $175, so we kind of know he's interested each year for that fee there. With all the fees totaled up, I think it was just over $5,000 a year we get for the fees from the licenses that we have on our open space properties. Okay. And
so those aren't reflected in the National Resources Department revenue summary of inland wetlands, or is that rolled into the inland wetlands?
That revenue is actually rolled into the open space account that the town has. The land acquisition open space fund.
Gotcha. And wrestling with the idea whether or not the electricity for the grazing fees ought to be offset directly by that particular line, that revenue source.
Seems like it should be.
Because it's an enhancement to the property, the fields that they're grazing on. Yeah, it's $1,200, but still.
Yeah.
The hope is once this contract, we rebid the contract, there's a couple of years left in this one, is that we can kind of include those fees and make that fees known to the person coming in that they cover those. But since this is a mid-contract thing that we installed this, we tried negotiating in, it didn't quite work, and this is where we kind of ended up with. I just want to basically put it here so everybody knows what's happening and however you want, guys want to handle it.
I appreciate you identifying it.
I'm just curious if I understood that correctly, the money flows into the land acquisition fund as opposed to the natural resources revenue?
Correct.
Okay.
And was that established by ordinance, or do you know?
Just the way it happened, I'm not sure.
Probably Board of Selectmen decision at some point.
Selectman or finance director at the time, I'm not sure how the.
Gotcha.
I think it's because in activity, I think when we did timber harvest and stuff with conservation, a similar type of activity happened.
That's right.
Into those accounts there, so they kind of followed that same type of background of being reinvested into the properties.
Gotcha. Understood. Anything else? I know I interrupted you midstream.
Nope, and I said our revenues from just the natural resource side, we're projecting 11,000. Our past years were just under $10,000.
Okay.
But
anything else? Anything? Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, I did have one question. You mentioned one of the reasons for the increase in the tree removal budget was the trimming of trees. Is there a distinction between removal and trimming related to whether we go out to contracted services? Because I think I'm familiar with the fact that Public Works has some chainsaws. And is there an opportunity where a full arborist might not be needed if you are directing the activity to suggest this is what needs to be trimmed? Is there an opportunity to use the resources we already have in town?
we do use them in the availability that Public Works has.
Okay.
But they're not always available to us, so then we have to resort to licensed arborists. There's only probably one or two guys on Public Works, which I would trust doing the trimming type activities. They've been trained to the standards and stuff.
Right.
A lot of the guys are removal guys on Public Works there, and it takes knowledge, special knowledge of which branch to trim to fully get the thing to branch the correct way and be productive.
Good. Can I assume you're trying to use those resources when appropriate?
Yes, actually, they're like 2 weeks ago I took a ride with Tom with some trees and stuff in town that I need removed, and he's right now while it's not snowing, they're going after them.
Okay.
But it's pretty much only during this winter period that I have the guys, and then once they go into their spring and summer maintenance, it's harder to get them to assist with these removals and stuff.
Okay.
Some of Steve's men that he supervises do some tree trimming too.
Trimming as well.
Mhm.
Good. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we are at planning and zoning. George, come on up. Good afternoon, George. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to hear.
I believe you have the proposed budget and revenues in front of you.
We do.
Aside from salaries, there's not much there to look at. The non-salary expenses are holding basically, I think, exactly with this year's budget. Don't anticipate any changes there. They are fairly small in amount. The advertising public notice account is the largest one. That varies depending on the number and types of applications that we receive. But we've been fairly consistent over the last few years at the $4,000 plus or minus level. The salaries are based on contracted services. Actually, the number that you have in front of you, which I think is the 207,900 number, will actually be less than that because we are in the process of replacing the zoning enforcement officer who retired, so the new salary will be slightly lower than what's shown. I don't know exactly what that number will be, but it'll be
to be determined.
To be determined, but it'll definitely be less. And that's pretty much it for
Pretty
planning and zoning.
straightforward.
I'm sorry.
All right. Questions?
Yeah, how far are you along in that hiring process?
We're about 95% there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We have a recommendation. We're about to make an offer.
Excellent. Good to hear that.
Any comments on revenue, George, for next year?
Again, it's very hard to predict. We have been running a little bit lower than budgeted. substantially lower, if you think of in percentage terms, based on the level of development activity. So it's very hard to think that it's going to be too much different, but you never know. It's somewhat lumpy. A big project can change the number dramatically because of the types of fees that we collect. But my guess is that the total fees are going to be less than what's budgeted this year. But it is very hard to predict.
Yeah, so less than the 35.
Yeah.
Why was there something anticipated that fell through? Is that what happened?
I'm not really sure. That may have been an optimistic number then, or I don't recall the rationale that went into that number last year, frankly. But you can see that was somewhat higher than previously years.
Yeah.
Maybe I think we're all very optimistic about the economy, and the economy in general certainly improving, but that so far hasn't resulted in a lot of new real estate development activity, but maybe it will in the next few years.
Okay. Anything further?
Okay.
Thank you. Dennis, Health Department.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. So looking at the Health Department expense report, proposed budget request, full-time salaries pretty much follow the contract for services guideline and numbers. Doesn't include the salaries, I think, for the GEA settlement yet. The only really significant increase in my budget for next year is for trying to get some overtime money for data entry for our secretarial staff to get caught up on entering permits for the septic tank pump out data that we keep. I put in $13,997 for that. It was based upon calculating that it's going to take about approximately 600 hours at $23.33 an hour to enter the backlog of pump up permits that we have. Certified lab work went up a little bit, $1,850. That's because Guilford has a couple of public wells that we regulate, the Bittner Park public well and the Lake Quanapug public well. They're seasonal wells, but EPA requires that we do more testing for them now. We have to do monthly testing on some of the wells. It's additional expense. We have to do a pre-opening test, chlorination. There's some new EPA rules regarding public water supplies which require additional testing. So if we want to keep those wells for the public to use, which are pretty critical, we have to comply with the testing. Mosquito control, that's staying the same, but that's going out to bid for next year. The contract, our current contractor expires June 30th, so we'll be bidding that probably around April or May. So that price could go up, it could go down also. The other items, printing, office supplies, education training, pretty much stayed the same or decreased slightly. I'm including some money for education and training, more than I have in the past 3 years. Connecticut's going to be adopting the new FDA food code for restaurants, so we have to get staff recertified by FDA to do inspections in food service establishments in Guilford. So there's going to be a bit of cost with that. Getting back to the overtime for the data entry, the reason why we're getting a backlog in the permits is, as you know, Guilford has a regulation where you're supposed to pump out your septic tank once every 5 years. We're finding people are really compliant with that, so much to the point that we're getting a big volume increase in pump outs. Not only does the health department remind people to pump out their tanks, but also a lot of the septic pumpers have programs now where they send out notices to remind residents to pump tanks out. So we have a lot of volume of pump out permits coming in. They're a little bit more time consuming now to process because they're using the new Munis system. It's more time consuming to populate the file, the spreadsheet for the pump outs. We have to scan the documents, so it's hard to keep up with that amount. So I do have my secretary and another town hall south secretary are willing to work overtime or extra hours to try to get caught up on the pump out data entry. That's the reason why I've added that money to the budget.
Is there any way, I mean, all those pump outs are coming from some business. Are the businesses creating the permits?
The businesses fill out their own permits, yep, and then they send them to us.
Is there any way to accept them or stipulate that they come in electronically?
Well, we have about 13 pumpers, and they're all at various levels of technology. You know, I don't know if all of them have means to do that. I mean, some still fill them out by hand, but, you know, it's worth looking into to see if some of the more advanced pumpers could, you know, merge their files. I don't know if they can merge with ours, whether our firewall will prevent that, but
That's the first level of question, is whether or not we're capable of providing external access to that for them to file those permits. To that end,
I mean, it's just data, it's repetitive data on properties.
to that end, Tony, Mary Jane, and myself met with the Munis, our Munis representative. We have from my understanding, and I will be given more information relative to the capabilities and the depth of the permitting system that we have, that we purchased a couple of years ago for land use activities. I haven't been over there and put my hands on it to see what it looks like, which is why I'm going to rely on the Munis folks. They're going to give me and a few other folks a presentation on the capabilities. At that point, we want to do a gap analysis to determine whether or not we are using the capabilities that currently exist. And if we are not, there will be a plan put into place for us to better utilize the tools that we have there, including things like allowing pumpers or people I know we already have some capacity for individuals when they come in for some other permits to use the terminal and start the permitting process. My biggest concern here, and Dennis and I talked about this before, is, okay, we've got 600 hours worth of it today. What is that? How is that increasing on a daily, weekly basis? And if it is, shame on us if a year from now we're back here saying we need another 600 hours.
$14,000 in overtime. Right. I mean, that means there's already a nucleus of some full-time employee doing it.
Right.
Well, if you recall, when we used to have the WPCA budget, it was combined with the health department budget. When we had the WPCA budget, I had a part-time staff who did the data entry. When she retired, we didn't replace her.
Right.
So
we had
her
that
position
staff
merged.
person, and now we're talking at $14,000 overtime.
Yeah, but
So it's worth looking into. There's got to be a way to.
And we reduced we reduced headcount by taking that staff out. Is that accurate? So, and the workload didn't decrease, is what Dennis is saying. It's just sort of accumulated and gotten backed up. So, but again, this is one of those areas where, if appropriate and applicable use of available technologies can prevent this from happening a year from now or 2 years from now, short of adding personnel to it, which is, I think a remedy of last resort at this point. But if the workload is such and the demands are such that we need to do it, then we need to seriously entertain either staff or overtime. But I need to be convinced that we are using the technology that we have to the level that it is capable of providing the efficiencies we need. And that's not an accusation on anyone. That is just, I need to understand whether or not we have a systemic problem with workflows and workloads that are too high for the current staff, or can be mitigated by the use of technology. That's
Also, I question the overtime because the staff is a 35-hour work week. Is that correct?
Right.
So 2 people could each do 5 hours each at the normal rate before it knocked into overtime rate, correct?
Correct.
And I also wondered about seasonal help as opposed to paying overtime? I mean, it needs to get done, but does it need to get done at an overtime rate? That's my question.
Yeah, well, I don't know if seasonal help would work. We don't have a desk available in Town Hall South. We're packed to the walls, to put another computer station in and another desk. So I don't think it'd work too well with seasonal. We have to use our existing staff. And they're willing to want to work overtime. They might not do more than 5 hours a week.
So then it wouldn't be at an overtime rate.
Well, it could. I mean, if they want to work more than 5 hours a week,
Right.
on a Saturday, they probably could.
Right.
So I put.
But the first 10
The
hours of
question
two
is,
people
we
would
would
still be at the.
necessarily entertain that.
Yeah, that figure I put is kind of a blend of regular time and a little overtime. I don't know if we're going to use all that much, but I put a little extra in there in case they do want to work overtime.
All right. You're going to look at the system of maintaining
Well,
these records.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, we don't need to go into
Yeah.
the level
Management.
of process.
No, but that's a big
This
enough-
is a classic example of mapping processes from one way of doing business to another way of doing business and accommodating the steps and the increments that need to be done. And I need to feel comfortable that that was done appropriately. And if it has been done appropriately and the tools are being used to the fullest utilization or capacity and capabilities, then we are in a resource crunch. But I need to understand that fully. So that doesn't mean you're not going to consider this, because the anticipation is we're going to have those discussions with the Munis folks over the next month and a half. So.
Matt, I have a question. I'm not
Yeah.
sure I understand what kind of issues we incur with the backlog. Are they just not being processed and approved, or?
Well, that's part of the question, is to understand how they're created, and without going into significant detail on the process, but I'm assuming that I don't know if you would describe a pump out permit and how that works, how we get it into the system. Because what concerns me is if we're doing it manually first and then waiting to enter it, as opposed to creating them electronically right up front. If we're creating them right up front, then theoretically,
one step.
It's a one
Most
step.
of the
step two.
suppliers, I'm not saying day one everybody has to submit it electronically, but I would imagine that most of the, somebody in the industry would want to be doing. They're probably doing it already. It's just a matter of clicking a button rather than carrying papers around.
Well, I can check in to see if the industry is capable, technically wise, to do that. But to answer your question about the impact, well, the town does have an ordinance that says you're responsible to pump out your tank every 5 years. In order to enforce that, we have to have current, up-to-date data on when was the last time you pumped out your tank. Another issue, too, is when homes sell, real estate transaction, the potential buyers come in, they want to investigate the septic tank data, they want to look at the pump out, what the records showed, whether there's high levels in the tank or if there's problems. And if we don't have that data available, in the file, but it's somewhere in a box, 2 years old because it hasn't been filed or no time to file it, it creates a problem for having up-to-date information. And that's really important for real estate transaction. We have agents coming in daily looking for pump-out data, and if it's not entered and it's in a box and we got to sort through 1,000 copies to find, the permit, it's time-consuming. So it's for potential homeowners. And
I wonder if it warrants a little disclaimer online to say that some of the information has not been entered, so at least they're aware.
Might be worth it.
Yes, are we up to date on all of the health licensing inspections? Facilities, beauty facilities, restaurants, smoky bars?
Right, we inspect those quarterly, depending on the class of the restaurant. Now, I mentioned the FDA code is going to be adopted in Connecticut starting next year. They're changing the inspection frequency of restaurants. But we inspect like a Class 4 restaurant, which is a large restaurant. We do those 3 to 4 times a year. Class 3 restaurants, we do 2 to 3 times a year. And Class 2 and Class 1, we do them like 1 time a year or twice a year. It depends upon the food preparation at that restaurant that determines the frequency. So
I happen to see in a hair studio type business that their inspection was expiring 4 days ahead of the time I looked at the certificate. And I just wondered, somebody had to be behind, because they're instructed to display it prominently.
Is this a beauty studio?
Yeah, beauty studio.
Like a hair salon or
Yeah,
no?
like a hair salon.
Okay.
And that surprised me. It was like it was going to expire in 4 days.
We sometimes can't get to them right on time, but when we try to, we
This is not a problem. You're not.
No, it's not
you
a
have enough
problem.
Personnel to take care of it.
No, it's we do get to them. Hair salons are kind of on a lower scale as far as importance, as far as sanitation goes. So we get to them eventually. But I'm not surprised that we might have gotten behind on some of them. Depends on how busy we are. So.
I want to go back to the permitting thing just for a minute. And Dennis, I don't mean to pick on your department. This is just for edification. This review of the permitting thing is going to take place across all of the land use for every department that's got access to the permitting software. So I wanted to make that clear. This is not directed specifically at your organization. Secondly, I just want to, back to the earlier sort of question that I maybe not phrased as a question, but are we continuing to add to the backlog? Or is everything that's coming in today going into the system electronically when we get it?
For permits, I would say we're probably not adding to it. We're maintaining it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
You know, it's.
Okay. So
Sometimes
theoretically, this is a one-time fix to to get caught up and be at a point where we don't have to go back to these paper records and search through filing cabinets and boxes, right?
Right.
Okay. And which obviously would provide better customer service to the community as well, because quicker response time, more accurate reflection of the information.
Right.
Okay. Sorry to bring you through that whole thing, but
No problem. Revenue projections, they're fairly similar to, they're a little bit lower than the year before, I guess. We've had a lot of commercial septic systems installed in large buildings, which generate more revenue for septic permits. But a lot of those are done now. I'm thinking of the Fonticello's 3 buildings that were built down there. Those are significant septic permits.
Yeah.
But the economy is hard to predict. I think we're probably safe to maybe stay status quo as far as estimated income for next year. So I show $31,209 estimate for next year.
okay, that makes sense. Any other questions? Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any call for a quick break, a health break for anyone? Are we all set? Ready to keep going? Good? Okay. Board of Selectmen. Karen? Oh, good afternoon, Karen.
So overall, the Selectmen's budget had a decrease of $14,000. The full-time salaries line, the staff of the First Selectman's office, their contracts expire June 30th, so any increases that might occur would be reflected in reserve for personnel. There's a decrease of $8,000 for the Board of Selectmen per their vote. It's a decrease of $2,000 per each of the members of the board. There's a $2,000 decrease in our advertising and public notices, and a $4,000 decrease in office supplies. We've decreased our use of toner for the smaller printers and paper, and I think we're all increasing our reliance on using the larger copiers, which allow us to scan a lot more documents, and so that's helped with that line a lot. There have been modest increases for the maintenance of the First Selectman's vehicle, which is a 2008 Explorer. A modest increase in education and training, and that's to, I usually attend, and along with some of my colleagues, an annual seminar for freedom of information. There's staff members that attend the CCM annual convention. That comes out of that line. And then an increase in the flags that we replace each year for Memorial Day, and that was a modest increase of $100. Other than that, everything remains pretty much the same. So.
Questions? That was easy.
Thank you.
What's that?
I always wondered how you guys.
Miscellaneous. I don't know yet. Nobody's come in and given me any yet.
It's either freedom of information requests or sometimes we're reimbursed for eviction expenses, which rarely happens.
Okay, probably steady from last year.
Yeah.
Legal.
Afternoon.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Let's go through it. Salaries consistent with contracts. General legal expense. That line item is for, contract preparation, negotiation of awarded bids, potential town real estate matters. New item is something called small cell installation matters, which, at certain points we might have to hire outside counsel on. Litigation, non-labor, non-land use. Certain litigation not covered by town insurance. FOI matters, primarily police FOI can be pretty elaborate and require outside expertise. Youth and family services subpoena matters, and also certain deep matters. The next line is consistent line item for a court stenographer. This happens when you're creating records for land use matters, appeals.
Which gets offset by a payment from the person who requested it, typically, right?
Okay, I think so. All right. Labor negotiations, this is pretty consistent with last year, 100,000. This is potential union and labor matters, not only contracts, but obviously grievances. There's a couple of heart and hypertension cases, pension matters. We also have a possible projected restatement of the police pension plan and a possible projected restatement of the personnel manual, which would require some outside labor expertise. The next item, judgments and losses. Again, this is a standard line item to reserve account for judgments not covered by town insurance or which exceed town's coverage limitations. The big change is the assessment revaluation claims. This is going to be the first year of appeals from the October 1, 2017 reval. I got input from Chuck Anders as well as Ed, the tax assessor, to kind of look at how we average the first year after a reval, and we have usually a large number of cases. Chuck has estimated a certain number of cases and a certain price per case based on his experience. And so we just basically took Chuck's number there. The next item is general zoning matters. A couple of years ago, we pulled, instead of just lumping that in with general, we thought it was kind of interest to see how much of it is dealing with zoning matters. This, might be a land use litigation matter. It also might be land use, legal consultation, zoning enforcement officer, town planner, P&Z. And I have a dues and memberships, which is pretty standard there. Connecticut Bar Association, Connecticut Association of Municipal Attorneys, Client Security Fund, which is a mandatory lawyer fee. Capital Region Purchase Council, we have a discount under SCROG, and it's reflected in there. Finally, education and training. There's been a new CBA requirement of 12 annual credits, and so I will have to take some courses, but there's a lot I can do online, and there's a lot I can do free online, so, and there's no request for publications because I can access it a lot online with CBA. And that's it.
I didn't change.
You need to change the tape? All right. We'll go to change the tape, and are there going to be any questions of Pam on the legal?
Yeah, I did have
All
one
right.
question.
Okay.
That's sorry.